Let's get going. So today's topic is public opinion and the war. So that is both a discussion on, well, really public opinion on the war, and then of course we need to talk about the war itself. The war itself. But before we get there, just a word on the stock market and oil prices. So the stock market reached a peak, an all-time high on January 27th of this year. And since that time, the stock market is down by 6%. It actually feels like it's down more than that, but it's 6%, which is not very unusual for the stock market to have this type of a pullback over the course of the year, and usually we get several of them. And more often than not, we get at least one 10% pullback in a normal year, a year without crisis. That's just normal stock market behavior. So to think that we're in the middle of a war with oil prices jumping, with all these worries that we're down just 6% off an all-time high, really it's not so bad. Since the war began on February 28th. So since that time, we're down 5%. So we had already been down 1%. A lot of those concerns were driven by AI bubble fears, AI disruption fears. So we were already off by 1%. And then since the war, we've dropped an additional 5%. So nothing earth-shattering, really. And what about oil prices? So oil prices, we constantly hear oil prices continue to go higher and higher. The pressures from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is really wreaking havoc. And almost every single day, you'll hear the pundits say, oil prices going higher. But the truth is, price spiked immediately. It jumped immediately. But since the beginning of the war, oil has actually been very stable. It's fluctuated up one day, up 1% or two one day, then down 1% or two the next day. But overall, since very early in the war, oil is roughly unchanged. So we had an immediate increase of something like, initially it overshot, so we were up like close to 40%, but then we came back down. The overall increase in oil prices is about 28%. Brent crude oil, which is really a European oil basket that's trading at about 110, slightly below right now. And WTI, which is a US basket of oil, that's trading around 100, a little bit below 196 right now. But we have not seen this constant upward pressure that if you're not looking at oil prices every single day, on the screen, you might think that every single day the price of oil and the price of gasoline is just going higher and higher and higher. That is not the case. So I just wanted to sort of set the record straight. And the sort of rough estimate among military analysts is that it could take somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks from today for the US to clear the Strait of Hormuz and get oil flowing freely again. Now, if that can be accomplished and the price of oil remains pretty much where it is today, more or less, for the next 2 to 3 weeks until they get the Strait of Hormuz clear, that would be very good. And I don't think in any way that would represent this massive oil shock to the economy that everybody has been warning about. In fact, if you look at oil prices in inflation adjusted terms, that is, if oil just for the last 15 years had been keeping pace with the overall inflation rate, it would put the price of oil right about where it is today. Okay. But the truth is, oil prices for the last 15 years have been very stable and even sort of just kind of gone down a little bit. So oil has really lagged the overall price of inflation. And therefore, again, in real terms, the price of oil is actually not high. It's sort of now just kind of keeping pace with the overall inflation rate of the economy. So for us to really have a massive oil shock, I think you'd need to see oil prices at 150 a barrel. That would do some damage. 100 or less really does not have any damaging impact on the economy. Even if it were to just stick here and stay here, it's not so problematic. But now let's turn to what I really want to talk about today, which is public opinion towards the war. Now, it's important to note here that the Democratic Party and people who tend to vote Democratic and the left wing overall in the United States, as far as public opinion goes and how it has an impact on the president's thinking, he will not take their views into account at all. Because no matter what policy initiative he pursues, they're against it. So it could be something that President Biden or President Obama would pursue and they would root for it. When Trump pursues it, they're totally against it. And he knows that. So the fact that every single Democrat, pretty much with the exception of John Fetterman in the Senate and the entire House of Representatives, they're all against the war for the most part. It has zero impact. The fact that, let's say, if this country is basically 50-50, 50% voting Republican, 50% voting Democrat, the fact that roughly 50% of the country is against the war, he could care less, not going to impact his thinking. So the question really is, where is the Republican Party? Where is MAGA on the war? And you can clearly see that there are factions within the former MAGA movement. I call it former MAGA movement because they're not MAGA anymore. Really spearheaded by Tucker Carlson that are railing against the war and the resignation of Joe Kent from the administration a few days ago really was an attempt to, now he may have been about to get let go anyway. So maybe he left because he was about to be fired and apparently he's under FBI investigations. So that really might have been his tipping point for leaving. But even if that's the case, even if he had other motives for leaving, which were, he was going to get fired anyway, he took advantage of the moment and he is really attempting to break right-wing support, break Republican support away from this war. And within an hour of his resignation, he had booked a showing on Tucker Carlson's podcast. We mentioned that actually on Wednesday that he was going to appear on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and he did appear. Once that podcast dropped, hundreds of accounts on social media, on X, all at once started posting clips with the exact same messaging, which is this war is all Israel's fault. Not only that, every war that we've fought, over the last 25 years are Israel's fault. Now, none of this is organic, meaning it's not just all of the messaging on X and on social media. It didn't just happen, right? This is highly orchestrated. It's coordinated. There is a big machine of people behind this. Not only are Americans behind it, you can be sure that the Russians are behind it, the Chinese are behind it, the Iranians are behind it, and also very big American money is behind it. This is a coordinated narrative attack. So the question is, how is this shaping this big machine, this well-oiled, well-financed machine? Is it having an impact on public opinion within MAGA, within the Republican Party? Now, it's clear that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others have very large followings on social media. There's huge numbers of subscribers and watchers to their podcasts. But are there fractures in the Republican Party? And if you kind of just casually read the press and social media, you would be led to believe that there are big fractures developing over Trump's decision to go to war with Iran. But these reports have been greatly exaggerated. And I want to just cite a poll that was published in the New York Post yesterday. I know today there's a new poll out published by Politico, but let's just deal with one poll. We'll take the poll published by the New York Post yesterday. It was conducted by a polling firm known called JL Partners. And the survey showed that 83% of likely Republican voters are supportive of Operation Epic Fury, which is the name of the operation, the war against Iran. Um, just 9%, so 86%, sorry, 83% are in favor. Just 9% say they are opposed to this military action against Iran. So far, it seems that Tucker and his friends are not really having much of an influence on Republican voters. Now, another question was asked. Nearly three quarters, that is 74% of those polled, say that the United States should continue its campaign against Iran until its military capabilities are completely destroyed. And just 16% say that, again, this is Republican voters, 16% say that we've done enough, time to stop the war. So three quarters still saying go on, push forward. Now, the poll also found that this is again, or almost repetitive, but 83% of likely Republican voters trust Trump's judgment. Okay. Now, how does that compare to likely Republican voters? Do they trust the judgment of Tucker Carlson? And it didn't ask about Candace Owens specifically. It mentioned podcasters like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, which I think was a smart question because Candace may be seen as more extreme, where someone like Megyn Kelly be seen as someone reasonable. Just 6% of likely Republican voters said they had more confidence in Tucker and Megyn than they do in Trump. Okay. Now, when it comes to trusting Trump's judgment on foreign policy, 84% say they trust Trump's judgments on foreign policy, while just 6% say they trust Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly's judgment on foreign policy. So, these numbers are very, very telling. And the bottom line here is that based on these polling numbers, you know, the media, even Wall Street, people in the tech sector, definitely people in academia, they're all telling us that MAGA is increasingly fractured over the war. But when you actually speak to actual Trump voters, the way these pollsters are doing, it's very clear they have total support for Trump and his war and what he's trying to accomplish, right? So that data is very, very important. So Trump has a mandate. Why is this important? Because Trump has a mandate to continue the war. A big concern that I've had is the stamina of the American people will ultimately wear thin. Trump will be pressured due to all the complaints, but his supporters are not complaining. They're with him. Yes, the media is complaining. Yes, academics are complaining, podcasters are complaining, but not Trump supporters, at least not as of now. And as I said, Trump is not going to pay any attention to anybody else other than those who vote for him. Now, on top of that, there are times when Trump even ignores his own voters. We've seen that. And in fact, with the tariffs, Trump's tariffs are not popular in America. They're not very popular among his voters, but he believes in it so much, he's so committed to it, that even due to the low popularity of tariffs, he has not backed off, right? Even the Supreme Court even shot him down, but he bounced right back and, imposed new tariffs. So, you know, I'm suggesting that if we saw the popularity for this war dip among his own voters, that would be a concern. But it doesn't mean that Trump would back off. But we don't even have to worry about that at that point, right? Because Trump has the full support. So at this point, it appears Trump is going to finish the job. Whatever finish the job means, in his mind, he's going to do it. And he is showing absolutely no signs of backpedaling in any way. So often I'll see people on X, tweet anytime now we're going to see Taco. Trump always chickens out. And first of all, to talk about Taco with this war is an absurdity, right? With the devastation that Trump and Israel has inflicted on the Iranian regime, even if Trump called an end to the war right now, you cannot call that Taco, right? This is more aggressive than any president has ever been in modern history in warfare. So taco should not be used in the same sentence with Trump when it comes to Iran. But even then, again, as long as Trump's support base is right there backing him, it shouldn't even enter our minds that he's going to prematurely call off the war and leave this regime standing at this point. And this brings me to all of this the I don't even want to call them right wing anymore because Tucker Carlson is not right wing. You could just as easily call him left wing. I don't know exactly how to characterize him other than being a big Jew hater and deeply anti-Semitic, and that seems to be really his major theme these days. That's pretty much all he talks about. He's obsessed with it. Um, so I think he is having some influence on people sort of questioning Israel, our relationship with Israel, and whether Israel truly is a good ally. And I don't want to get into that topic too much, but I saw a very good quote by a newsman by the name of Hugh Hewitt. Hugh Hewitt is in the media, and he's no longer in the mainstream media. He does make appearances once in a while on Fox, but he's a podcaster these days. And for years, he was a writer. He was on TV. He used to be part of mainstream media. He is a real heavyweight when it comes to thinking about politics in general and geopolitics. And I just want to quote him. He made this statement yesterday, and I think it's so accurate. And I don't know how many people are aware of it, but I just want to read this quote because it relates to our topic that we've discussed so far. He says, "The state of Israel is objectively the most important ally of the United States. It is a nuclear power. It is the equal of any military on the globe in its ability to strike far and hard and to dominate its region. It's an intelligent superpower and an engine of technological excellence and ever-increasing breakthroughs. If any country had to pick one strong ally, not named the United States, it would pick Israel." So obviously, I agree with him. I think he's right on the money. The one thing I would add to his statement is that the United States and Israel share the same values and they share the same interests. So often you'll hear people say, well, Israel's interests and the United States interests may diverge at some point. The truth is, we may think they diverge, right? At a superficial level, you could come up with a scenario where our interests diverge. But the truth is, when you really dig deep into it, our our interests are completely aligned. And I really can't think of a really a case where they have actually diverged. We may think they diverge, and in certain periods of time, like the Obama administration was pursuing a nuclear agreement with Iran, and Israel thought that was a terrible idea. So on a superficial level, you could say our interests diverged. But when you get deep down into the core, you realize no, Obama was just completely off base. He was misguided, and our interests didn't diverge. He was just living in a delusional state or a fantasy world where he thought that the Iranian regime could be reasonable, and he was wrong. So our interests didn't actually diverge. It was a misperception on his part. Okay, now there are many people who are trying to jump on remarks made by Trump. And this is going into the idea about, do our interests ever diverge, right? Do our interests ever diverge? So lots of people are trying to jump on remarks made just yesterday by President Trump that the United States didn't know that Israel was going to strike the area called South Pars. This is South Pars is the name of Iran's big gasoline facility that Israel struck a couple days ago. And yesterday, Trump said, "Didn't know about it. I didn't know they were going to do that." So that has led many people to believe that, maybe Netanyahu and Trump are not on the same page. Maybe the United States and Israel our interests are diverging. But what's the truth? What's the truth? So let's just go back a few days. After Israel struck South Pars to basically paralyze their Iran's ability to run their electrical grid, right? Because their electrical grid, most of it is gasoline fueled. Uh, it was initially reported that the strike was coordinated between the United States and Israel. So after that, a few hours later, we see Trump's tweet. I didn't know about it, he says. Then, after Trump's tweet, maybe an hour later, it was reported that Qatar was extremely upset about the strike on this gasoline infrastructure. And the reason they were so concerned is now they're worried that Iran is going to retaliate against their oil facilities and their facilities. So the speculation began to circulate that the Qataris must have called Trump, and Trump pretended as though he knew nothing about it. And on top of that, other Arab governments were concerned that because Israel did this, Iran might strike them again in retribution. So the whole Arab world and the Persian Gulf were very upset about Israel's attack on this gasoline infrastructure. And the way Trump dealt with it is, hey, look, I didn't even know about it. I didn't know about it. And he sent that tweet, but he really did know about it, right? So this is some of the speculation. He's just trying to take the Arab heat off himself and put the blame on Israel. Now, first, let me say this for anyone who thinks that maybe Trump didn't know. You speak to anyone at high levels of US military, anyone who understands the incredibly tight coordination between the United States and Israel, understands, especially in this war, always, but in this war, they are in complete lockstep. They are completely intertwined. There is no way that Israel would or could carry out such a strike without Trump giving the green light, right? Again, anyone who has ever worked in the US defense establishment and the national security establishment understands that this is an actual impossibility. It could not only wouldn't it happen because it could not. It's simply an impossibility. It's not operationally possible, right? Because their operations are so intertwined right now. And there's a command center called CENTCOM, which the United States runs, and everything runs through it gets run up through CENTCOM, and then the orders go down from CENTCOM. It's an impossibility. Of course, Trump knew. So, is it true that Qatar was caught by surprise? The other Persian Gulf countries in the Arab world were caught by surprise? Highly, highly unlikely. Okay. The reality is they probably all knew it. Trump is most likely just playing good cop, bad cop with the Iranians. Basically saying, yeah, these Israelis, boy, they are a pack of wolves. I can't even restrain them. I can't restrain them. Be careful. I'm the only one who can hold them back. And if you want me to hold them back, you better do as I say. Otherwise, I'm going to unleash them. And he said actually in this tweet, the next time, the next time you strike an oil or gas facility in the Middle East, not only am I going to let Israel do it, we're joining in, and it's going to be a lot worse. So I think this is all a game. I think it's all a game. And anybody who is jumping on the bandwagon that there's a split between Israel and the United States either doesn't understand the integration between the United States and Israel in this war, or they just don't want to understand it and they want to spin it and make believe that there are splits and that Israel is behaving as a loose cannon and see, this is why we shouldn't get involved with Israel. So that's the reality. Now, is it true that Qatar is really upset that are they blaming Israel for their for Iran attacking their oil facilities? Could that be true? Well, let's look at what's getting lost in this whole discussion. I'm just going to give you a partial list of Iran's attacks on Middle Eastern energy infrastructure before Israel struck South Pars. Okay? Iran struck what's known as, I'm going to say the names, you don't have to know the names, but the Ras Laffan LNG complex in Qatar, right? That's a natural gas complex in Qatar. They struck a big oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. There have been hundreds of drone attacks on Saudi oil fields. They struck a refinery in Abu Dhabi. They struck gas fields in Abu Dhabi. They struck ports in Bahrain and oil refineries in Bahrain. All of this happened and was continuing to happen and had nothing to do with the Israeli strike. So Iran was going to continue doing this. There's like no chance that the Arab countries are actually truly concerned that Iran is going to take retribution. Iran has been attacking them as much as they possibly can already, directing their attacks at their oil facilities. Why? Because they want to drive up oil prices. So I think this is all an act. None of it's reality. And I think a lot of it is aimed at just keeping the Iranian regime off guard and off balance. And this fits very well with Trump's overall approach to all foreign policy. Keep your enemies off balance, keep them guessing, keep them confused. So, was Israel's strike on South Pars an escalation in American-Israeli targeting? You're darn right it was. It was an escalation. And the United States was 100% on board with that escalation because the goal here is to put increasing pressure on Iran and hit their targets that are closer and closer to their heart and shut down this not only shut down their military, but shut down the economy of the Iranian regime and the IRGC, really to paralyze them. And we're going to see more of this. So, bottom line here is there is no gap between the United States and Israel. They are on the same page completely. Now I want to move to the Strait of Hormuz and the oil crisis. So we know that Iran's military capabilities are being degraded by the day. They still have military capability. I don't want to minimize it. In fact, sort of shockingly, they somehow managed to shoot down a U.S. Fighter plane a couple days ago. That was a stunner. No one expected that. We have continued to think the U.S. military that we have control over Iranian airspace, and then this happens. Thankfully, the pilot was able to land the plane to safety, and he was unharmed. But the fact that they can hit uh, U.S. and obviously therefore Israeli fighter planes is a concern. How is this possible? There's some speculation that that somehow China is managing to sneak in more missiles into Iran. You know, we had thought that the United States had sealed all transport routes, so there was no way that was going to happen. And at this point, we don't know if that actually happened. But there is some speculation and worry that perhaps China is managing to get some missiles through. Again, we do not have confirmation on that, but it's a possibility. But anyway, the bottom line is we continue to degrade them militarily. The real sword that they have hanging over the United States and Israel in this war effort is the chaos that they are sowing in the oil markets. Uh, and to be successful in this war, it is absolutely essential that we stop Iran from sowing chaos. So again, there's two ways. We said the Strait of Hormuz is one way they're sowing chaos. The other way is, their continued attacks on their Gulf neighbors, specifically targeting their oil infrastructure, right? That has sent oil prices higher. But as we know, the Persian Gulf has rallied behind the United States. And now they are insisting, it's backfired on Iran to the extent that the truth is it hasn't sent oil prices higher any further, right? We talked about it earlier that we have that one-time big increase in oil, but we haven't seen oil prices continue to go up. Uh, and equally as important in their kind of failure, all these Persian Gulf states are now insisting that Iran must be rendered incapable of future attacks. Because the Gulf countries now know that if this regime is left standing and they are left with military capability, they're going to do this again and again in the future. They'll shut down the Strait of Hormuz again and again in the future and disrupt these Arab countries' economies and hit their infrastructure and kill their civilians. So the Arab countries are firmly behind the U.S.-Israeli war effort at this point. Um, but what about the Strait of Hormuz? What about the Strait of Hormuz? First of all, how have we prevented oil prices from continuing to rise? Because we have succeeded there. And there's been a few different mechanisms that have been used. First of all, the United States has been releasing oil from its strategic oil reserves, and other countries have done the same. The United States and 32 other countries stockpile barrels and barrels of oil for times of emergency. And this is a time of emergency, so they have announced that they will be releasing those oil barrels into the market to keep oil prices from going up. Now, those barrels that have been kept in storage, they have not hit the market yet, but they will. And the knowledge that they will hit the market has been one factor that has kept oil prices at somewhat reasonable levels. Another key factor has nothing to do with the United States, but Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are using pipelines that they built years ago in preparation for Iran someday shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. They developed their own pipelines which feed into the Red Sea, and then those oil tankers can take that oil to Europe and elsewhere. So that's also been a help to keep oil prices lower. And then Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, announced a few days ago that the United States is removing the sanctions on Russian oil. That means that Russian oil can be channeled, can be sold to anywhere in the world. So that also has capped the upward pressure on oil. And Bessent also said that the United States is considering removing sanctions, believe this one or not, on Iranian oil that is actually sitting on the seas, not oil that hasn't left Iran yet, but oil that's already on the seas, and remove sanctions there. And that could also ease pressures on oil prices because then anyone could buy it. Um, But these are all band-aids. And yes, they might be able to take us another 2 or 3 weeks without oil prices going too much higher. But ultimately, the problem needs to be resolved. The problem of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz. So the question is, what are we doing about that? And what we're doing about it has started. It's underway, and there was a big article this morning in the Wall Street Journal that discusses it. That U.S. Fighter planes are flying at very low altitudes, along with helicopters, and the process of just taking out anything that moves on the shorelines of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be obliterated, right? So their ability to fire missiles at us, their ability to mine the Strait of Hormuz, this operation has begun. Now, it also looks like we are going to have boots on the ground. The question is, what are those boots on the ground there to do? So we know that 2,500 Marines are being sent, uh, and and maybe more, could be more coming. The question is, what is their mission? And we are they going to try to take over Karg Island? Karg Island is the area where 90% of Iranian oil is stored and then shipped out for export? Are we going to take that over? And if we take over their oil infrastructure completely and they can't export, it's a way of pressuring the Iranians to clear the straits. So we're applying military pressure. We're applying this other pressure, which is seizing their oil assets and basically squeezing them economically, and really cutting off the entire lifeline to the regime. When you cut off oil, then you really do shut off the ability of the regime to function in all ways economically. Um, and and then the third part of this is, are we laying the groundwork once we hit them militarily, once we're squeezing them politically by taking over their ability to export oil? We have to provide safety for oil tankers to travel through. So the military component is one part, but now we need many ships, many ships to escort the 150 oil tankers that are sitting outside the Strait of Hormuz that have just been sitting, waiting. 150 boats need to be escorted, and then more, because there'll be more to follow. And this is where Trump has asked NATO countries to play a helpful role. Initially, NATO said no. Initially, NATO said no. The one exception to this was the Czech Republic. They said yes. India is another country that has said yes, we will help. Well, just yesterday, there was an important development. Japan, who's not in NATO, but Japan said we want to play a helpful role. The UK said we'll play a helpful role. France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, all these countries have sort of backtracked or backpedaled. And we don't know exactly what a helpful role means. Does it mean they're going to supply ships? Does it mean something else? So far, those pledges have been rather vague, but I'm sure it's being discussed with the Trump administration. But perhaps they're going to provide ships, and that would be really a very valuable help. And of course, they should, because it's these countries, it's not the United States that relies on oil from Iran, or excuse me, through this oil that gets channeled through the Strait of Hormuz, all this Middle Eastern oil, Saudi oil, Qatari oil, Bahrain oil, United Arab Emirates oil. The United States, we don't use any of it, right? It's all going to NATO, European NATO countries. So they should really play an important role here. Okay, well, let's assume that the United States and Israel continue to make enormous progress. Let's assume that we win. Well, what does winning actually mean? And first, let me just say a necessary condition to victory is controlling the Strait of Hormuz. If we do not gain control of the Strait of Hormuz, whether we take Kharg Island or not, that's less important. We need to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And if we don't do that, you can't say that we've won. That is an essential condition for victory. What are the other essential conditions for victory? Well, Iran can't have any capacity to make nuclear weapons, right? They have to be deprived of any capacity to make ballistic missiles. We have to end all of their support for their proxies in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and throughout the world where they sponsor a lot of terrorist cells. That needs to be completely brought to an end. Again, we mentioned taking control of the Strait of Hormuz because their ability to disrupt global oil markets is a big problem. We have to make sure they can never disrupt global oil markets again. So that's victory. I mentioned four: no nukes, no ballistic missiles, no support for proxies, no ability to disrupt global oil markets. Those are the four conditions necessary to say we won. But that said, let's face it, if this regime is left in place, it will just be a matter of time. They will rebuild. It may be 5 years, it may be 7 years, it may be 10 years. Look, just last year, we destroyed their nuclear capabilities. But we know that in less than a year, they're already doing everything they can to rebuild them, right? They haven't come very far, but we know that's their intention. So if this regime is left in place, they will rebuild. It's just a matter of how long will it take them. Now, even though regime change, or let's call it regime collapse, is not a stated objective in this war by the United States or Israel, let's face it, the ultimate victory, whether we say it or not out loud, is regime collapse. And then we have the potential to see in Iran a new political system that would want to be a part of the civilized world, right? That would be a complete and true victory. Well, how feasible is that? Well, based on some Mossad sources, It seems that Israel estimates that the Iranian regime is on the verge of losing control due to ongoing eliminations and strikes in the regime leadership. Like the leadership in Iran is in total chaos. That seems to be pretty clear. Now, there is I think, a misunderstanding in the United States and in the West, broadly speaking, that, you take out one leader, well, you'll just fill it with another leader. And if you take him out, there's another one. And if you take him out, there is just an endless supply of radical Iranians that can step into the vacuum. And that is not really so true in Iran. It's true in Gaza. I will say it's true in Gaza. Why is that? Because the Gazan population is completely radical, right? They are, from the time they are babies, they are brainwashed into believing that their mission is to bring Islam to the world through any means necessary. And, the more violence, the better, right? You really can't find too many people in Gaza who don't hold that ideology. That doesn't mean they all support Hamas, right? They may hate Hamas because they think Hamas did a bad job governing, right? The economy was a mess. They were super corrupt. So they may hate, people living in Gaza may hate Hamas, but that doesn't mean that they don't want Islam to spread throughout the entire world. Iran, and therefore in Gaza, when you take out one leader, yeah, there's an endless supply of people to fill that role, to fill the vacuum. Iran is completely different. The the radicals in Iran are a minority, right? Now, 10% is a big minority, but you do not have an endless supply. You do not have an endless supply. And more specifically, when you're taking out leader after leader, you're taking out people who have years and years of know-how. And when you're replacing them with a younger generation that is much less experienced, they're going to be far less competent. And in war, that matters. Competence is actually critical. We took out, when I say we, the United States, Israel, we took out Larijani a few days ago. He was the de facto leader of Iran, not the supreme leader, but the de facto leader, the guy who is really running the show over the last few years. You take him out, and you just lost an enormous wealth of experience, who knows how to play the political game, who knows how to play the military game. So it does have a massive effect when you're eliminating layer after layer of leadership in Iran. And Israel, for sure, with Trump's blessing, intends to make the internal crisis among the Iranian regime worse in the coming days. And what I'm hearing is that they have plans that include, and this is very vague, but to quote, unusual and powerful action that has not been done before directly to undermine the regime's ability to govern. So in the days ahead, whether we hear about it or not, we'll probably hear about it days later, we're going to see some unprecedented, actions to destabilize the government. And the goal is to create a breaking point, to create a breaking point that sends a clear message both to people within the IRGC and the Basij, as well as the Iranian public, that it's game over for the regime. So for regime collapse, right? Again, we've discussed this, but I want to bring a new angle to it. So many people argue you need boots on the ground, like real boots on the ground to cause a regime to collapse. Like the way we brought Saddam Hussein down, you need boots on the ground. Okay, well, we didn't have great success in Iraq, but we did bring the regime down. And the only way you can bring regime down is to have boots on the ground. But I think, to make comparisons with Iraq, we've talked about this many times, but it's a bad comparison. Why? Because in the case of Iran, we have intelligence capabilities that are so sophisticated, so superior to anything that we've ever had before. And these intelligence capabilities come both from Israel and the United States. So, of these two intelligence communities working together, using sophisticated techniques that we've never seen before in history, certainly not in Iraq, certainly not anywhere else. We have deeply penetrated the Iranian regime and society to an extent, again, never seen before in all of history. This is a first. But there's an additional element to all this. We have the active participation of the Iranian people, right? The Iranian people themselves understand the magnitude of the moment, this opportunity. They've never had this opportunity before. And they are actively participating in ways, again, that we've never seen before in history. They are actively helping the US military and the Israeli military with targeting. And they're doing it independently. They didn't ask to do it. They have sought out, they've given mechanisms for reaching out to US and Israeli intelligence. They've been given vehicles, and they are reaching out, right? They are the ones initiating. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. There's another aspect to this. So you have the Iranian people participating, right? They are the boots on the ground. Now, what about the Iranian military? I heard a U.S. general named Jack Keane. Probably some of you have seen him. Sometimes he's appears on Fox. And he was asked about, yes, there's the IRGC, which is the elite military apparatus, but then you have the normal military. It's called the Artesh. The Artesh. There are 300,000 soldiers in the Artesh. There's 150,000 soldiers in the IRGC. The Artesh, this 300,000 uh, the military, they are not really ideological. They are armed. They are not used in repression like the IRGC and Basij are used in repression because the regime doesn't really know if they can trust them to repress the people. They don't know if the Artesh would actually open up fire and kill people in cold blood. So they're not that trusted, but they are armed. So there's a potential there that they could join an uprising, or they might be people that could take part in a normal, rational government in the future. So we never hear so much about the Artesh, but these are resources, and it's in all likelihood the U.S. and Israel have been in touch with members of the Artesh, right? We don't know that for a fact. I'm speculating, but it's reasonable to think that we do have communications with them. Um, Interestingly, the head of the Mossad, that's the Israeli CIA, his name is David Barnea. Before this war began, he gave an assessment on whether or not it was possible for the regime to fall in Iran. And he presented an assessment to ministers of the government. And his assessment was that if the military objectives of the operation were achieved, meaning severe damage was done to the senior leadership of the regime, if government institutions were basically severely degraded, if the regime's coercive apparatus, the IRGC and the Basij, were severely degraded. He said at that point, the Mossad and the CIA would know how to bring about a collapse of the regime, meaning could effectively mobilize the Iranian people into the streets, and CIA and Mossad would be able to identify people capable of forming a governing alternative, right? So I'm bringing this to your attention now because I just came across it, right? I think it recently got released that he made this statement. So that's really an interesting insight from the head of the Mossad. Finally, to conclude, how much longer? How much longer will the war go on? So Netanyahu was asked this question. Uh, he was asked by Hebrew speaking reporters. Separately, he was asked this question by English speaking reporters, and he gave two different answers. In Hebrew, he said, the war will take as long as it takes. In English, he said, it will end much sooner than people think. Okay. So, you know, they don't contradict each other, but they're different answers. They're both perhaps true. They're both perhaps true. Um, I think in the case of him speaking to his the Israeli public, he does not want them to get their hopes up. He wants them to have endurance and stamina and make them think that they're in it for the long haul. And the truth is, in the case of Israel, it is a bit different. Why? Because the war is not only about Iran, it's also about Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the war for Israel is going to go longer. It's going to go longer because it could go several months longer. Because rooting out Hezbollah is a more precise, in some sense, even more complex task. But when he's speaking in English, he's really just talking about Iran. And that war could be over sooner than people think. Sooner than people think. Look, I continue to believe 3 to 4 weeks. I may have said the same thing last week, but I don't think we're months away. I think we're weeks away. Um, the final comment I'd make in terms of getting back to whether this regime could collapse. Um, a senior Israeli intelligence official, unnamed, said, we see a lot of signs of things cracking. He said, I wish I could divulge them, but I can't, but we see them. Um, he went on to say, we are doing everything we can to create the conditions for it to collapse, but there's a chance it may survive. At the end of the day, we can only do so much. It's up to the Iranian people at the end of the day. They need to come out into the streets in droves and key people from the uh, military, not the IRGC, maybe the IRGC as well, but the regular Iranian military, the Artesh, need to come out and join. So a lot of things need to go right for this regime to collapse, but it is absolutely feasible. I just want to end. I know it's an hour, but I told Jesse that I would uh, say something spiritual. We used to do that regularly. We haven't done that in a while. I want to end with the following. So, my son Mike, some of you know him, some of you have met him. He got called back, so he's been fighting in Lebanon, and thankfully in Israel, because everything is so close, uh, you can go in and then you can come back out, right? So he goes in for a week, he gets a breather, he comes out for a couple days, then he goes back in. And he just came out and he said to me yesterday, Dad, I'm really um, having a bit of a tough time. Not so much with the war itself, but the transition, being at war, and the next day, the same day actually, returning to work, returning to my wife and my son. One day I'm having missiles fired at me and I'm diving on the ground and I'm firing back. The very next day, I'm holding my son and hugging my wife, and it's very disorienting. I can't even describe how disorienting it is. And my emotions are kind of all over the place. And obviously, he went on to say, look, everyone on my team, they're all seeing psychologists because everyone's going through sort of similar things. What do you think, Dad? And I said, look, Mikey, look, if you want to see go right ahead. Of course, see a psychologist. But let me say this to you. And I'm saying this to my son, and I'm saying it to all of you and to all of us. God picked you. He picked you for whatever it is you're doing in life, for whatever is coming at you in your life, all the different things you're juggling, the responsibilities, the pressures, the struggles. He picked you. Why? It's not just that God believes you can handle it. It's more than that. He picked you because he knows that you will do incredible things with it, right? Only you, Mike, and I'm speaking to all of you, you can go to war. And then a day later, you can hold your son in your arms and hug him and kiss your wife and sit down and have a great, you can handle it. Not only can you handle it, you can do it beautifully. And God chose you to do it because he knows how well you can do it and he needs you, right? You're his soldier. You are his soldier. If your commander said to you, I need you to do something, what would you do? Yes, sir, I got it. I'm going to serve my country. I'm going to serve my people. That's what God is expecting all of us to do. We all got this. We've all been given an incredibly important mission. And every single day that you open up your eyes in the morning and take a breath, it's because God believes in you. He would have taken you out if your time was up. There's so much more to accomplish. Everything that comes at you today and tomorrow and every hour, it's because he believes you got this. So that's a think something to take with you every single day. It's something I think about. It's something I told Mikey to think about. And I think it's quite empowering when you think the master of the universe, your creator, he has you on the front lines. You got it. All right. Questions, comments?